Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long time. Now, without further ado, let's get started. You know what time it is. It's time to open up the comic books I ordered in September of 2024. So let's get started. I got a lot of great comics to talk about and review for you guys today. Starting with this box right here. Of course, if you live in Florida, you do know that we just had a massive hurricane. And I apologize to the mailman. He had to, jump over a couple fallen trees to get me this, but it's all worth it in the end. And first one up, we have the Ultimate Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 4, which is by Brian Michael Bendis, of course, Mark Bagley, well, doing most of the series. We have a really nice spine going on here with Spidey swinging. It's not just the faces as we had in the previous two volumes, and then Spider-Man like lunging at you kind of suspiciously in the third one. This one is of him swinging. I think it looks the best out of all the spines, actually. So it's a great start already. Let me crack this book open for you guys. But let me talk about Ultimate Spider-Man, because it's a bit of a weird one. If you grew up in the 2000s, you loved Ultimate Spider-Man, and you were reading comics, yeah, this is going to be it. This was the Spider-Man series because it had the best supporting cast, some of the best character work you can ever find in comics. I mean, Aunt May has like a whole issue dedicated to a therapy session, just unpacking everything in her life that she's had to face. And it's great stuff. It's decompressed. You have the time to spend with the characters to really care about them. And it's just great storytelling. However, I think there's a certain point in the series to where things went a little bit off kilter, It says right here, a new era for Ultimate Spider-Man, which is true. But I'd say the little reboot they do here, it's not great. I don't think it's very good at all, actually. Unfortunately. Now, there are still great comics in this omnibus. I wouldn't have bought it otherwise. By the way, here we go. We have kind of the new design for Ultimate Spider-Man post Mark Bagley, which is a great Spider-Man artist that did it. We have Spider-Man and a lot of his friends and family that probably is the focal point of the entire run. It's just about Spider-Man and his relationships with people and how they grow and change and how he grows and changes over the course of basically his whole high school career, which really feels impactful and meaningful. And of course, we do have some great artwork here as well. I think my main issue with this book versus the first three, because I didn't really have a problem with the first three, my main problem here is that it feels like it's regressing just a little bit. Spider-Man had so much growth, and in this, he starts being pretty immature again. And you still have all those great relationships, but you also have some stuff that's not that good at all. Like, man, let me be honest with you guys. There are short spoilers for Volume 3 and 4 of Ultimate Spider-Man, so if you want to skip that, go ahead. Do it. You're fine. But Ultimate Spider-Man goes through a point where it has the Clone Saga, which happens, of course, in other Spider-Man books as well, like right over here, for example. But what they did in here was they brought Gwen Stacy back to life. And they basically take her in, because she's a clone, as sort of like an adopted, child. The issue with that is Peter Parker and the Gwen Stacy clone start having a relationship, and it feels really weird. It feels like a little bit incestuous, almost, which didn't click with me. Maybe I need a reread, but we still have some great action stuff going on in this book. It's just the new status quo, it's more than a little strange. But the character work still generally is very, very good. It has a great J. Jonah Jameson moment in here. But, oh yeah, and Peter has a disastrous haircut, by the way. They don't show it here, but it's rough. It's not great. It's not amazing. I still love it because I love Ultimate Spider-Man, and it's, you know, the one real down point of the run. I think the next volume that'll come out, Volume 5, is some of the best Ultimate Spider-Man stuff. The ending there's an ending there that always gets me emotional. So when that comes out, I'll talk about it and I'll love it. But for this, it's fun, mostly fine. But I don't think, if you're looking for like a great moments of storytelling, that's not going to be what you actually end up getting here. Like I said, again, love Ultimate Spider-Man. This book didn't do it for me. So let me put the dust jacket back on here with, you know, Venom, Eddie Brock, taking over Peter Parker's life yet again in this volume. But yeah, all right. Now we're going to move on to this second one, something where I'm going to have a lot more positive things to say. All right, let's get this cracked open. If this is what I think it is, and it is, we have, oh my God, that looks beautiful. As you can tell from the size, it's an DC Absolute Edition, Batman Arkham Asylum. Now, what's so interesting about this book? Okay, it's a Batman book. So what? Well, I'll tell you what. In this book, written by Grant Morrison, who did other great books like All-Star Superman, Doom Patrol, everything like that. Animal Man, of course. I love that book. But the issue, not issue, what makes Arkham Asylum so unique is that it is a horror comic. Just set in Batman's universe. In Arkham Asylum, which is, of course, the prison to which Batman sends all of his villains that are insane and mentally ill. So, the interesting part here is that Batman isn't much of a hero in this one. He's just a guy wandering around this prison, trying not to go insane when confronted with all of these people that have done such horrible things who do not have a grasp on reality. But, yes, sir, we have this little light bulb here signifying, I guess, that lights go out here. It's very creepy. If you've seen anything like The Lighthouse or something very atmospheric like that, where you're not really experiencing the story as you would, you know, the latest volume of Ultimate Spider-Man, for example, is something that's very different and very unique. You experience the atmosphere. You experience the hints of what's really going on here. You experience the madness and the horror of it. And the actual story, oh my God, bro, they snuck this in tight. It's not very relevant. Oh my God, but this is beautiful. The design of this book is gorgeous. Just take a look at this right here, and that'll tell you a lot of what you need to know about the story here. It's amazing. We have this twisted sort of mindscape of skeletons and rotted corpses and contorted mushrooms and buildings, and this is a great image by Dave McKean right here. We have the back of the book as well, which seems to be some sort of contorted cross as well. Very creepy. A lot of signals and symbols that you're not sure what exactly they mean, but they're going by you so fast that it still feels like additive to the story. I love this book, if you can't tell. One thing with this, this Absolute Edition specifically, doesn't have any sort of design on the spine. So if you want to display it, you would display it with the slipcase facing out like this, which is a nice slipcase as well. We got Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, Grant Morrison, Dave McKean. But as for the actual book, let me show you something that's just so fascinating when it comes to Absolute Editions, and this story specifically. And that is the brilliance of the art. This shit is horrifying. I love Dave McKean's art from all his covers that he did for Sandman, and you put some horror music on, read this story, and it's gonna feel like a new experience in comics. It's pushing the medium in a new direction, or at least it was back in 1989 when this book came out. It was something entirely new back when Grant Morrison wasn't as famous, wasn't as acclaimed, and he was just doing some of the best work in his career. For example, Does this look like a comic book? Not really. It really does not. But it is incredible. We have tons of extras as well in the back here. We have what Batman will look like in this book. Very shadowy and mysterious and obscured. We also have an afterword by Karen Berger, who, if you don't know, was behind the Vertigo Comics imprint, which did all the most unique work in comics at the time, most experimental work, the work that really pushed boundaries, that changed things, that let creators run wild. This was amazing, Karen Berger's work with all these different series, because they let creators be mature and individualistic and create some of the best art of their careers. And here we have the promotional art for Batman Arkham Asylum, with a Joker that is just absolutely unhinged and terrifying. And in this book, Joker is terrifying. There's a lot of scary shit in here. And you really get to see how they manifested on that. Because this is a book that you can't just read once and get fully, I think. I think you can get a vague sense of what the story is trying to say here, but overall, it's very weird, and I didn't love it my first time going through it. I really love the artwork, but the story, I was like, it's alright. It's trying to do horror, but there's not much of a story here, so it's just fine. But when I came back to this, and you'll see through the extras, if you read these extras right here, with all the scripts, you see so much work going into this, and you see the big ideas coming to play. And maybe I just wasn't, reading as intelligently as I could have, because Grant Morrison, we have full scripts here as well, which is absolutely insane. And I'll show you some of the developmental work before moving on here. But as you can tell, I love this book. I don't think if you're looking for a mind-blowing story, you're really going to get that, because it is more of an experience. But here you have some of the notes for Arkham Asylum. Moving on, we have the names, the drafts for the story. Moving even further, we keep going through it. The very rough drafts of everything that's going on here. And some more detailed drafts, of course, as the pencils start coming in. And, yeah. Just a ton of extras in here with the full story as well. Just some absolutely insane art that could be in a museum. I don't know, like Van Gogh or something. Just a horrifying, Batman book that I think is essential reading in, that era of Batman comics, which happens to be my absolute favorite. It's the only Batman era I'll actually reread. But Arkham Asylum, just a sensational series, a great presentation here by DC. Just lovely. This will be one of the books I talk about next month, hopefully, when I discuss my favorite horror comics of all time, because this is definitely up there. Alright, this box is very, very snug, very secure. But I'm very excited for the next few books that we're going to talk about. Spoiler, one of them's a horror book, which is coming up right now. Yep, here it is, and it looks gorgeous, of course. The Bone Orchard Mythos Tenements. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of this. It's just a standard size hardcover. It's not a deluxe edition or anything like that. It's got that same black, simplistic design they have for the other two books in the series. This is the biggest one by far. This is the best one, in my opinion. The one that you get all the information in about what's really going on in this horror series. But let me step back a minute and explain what the Bone Orchard Mythos series is. If you're familiar at all with Jeff Lemire, he did the Sweet Tooth comics that got turned into that popular Netflix show. He did some really beautiful one-off stories like Maze Book and, what else? What was that one called? With the Underwater Welder. That was it. Just some really beautiful personal stories that relate back to his childhood and make me feel some type of way. I love Maze Book, especially. That one's a great story. He's done Fish Flies recently. He's, done all type of things. Jeff Lemire is just a great storyteller. And he does horror excellently. He's done Gideon Falls with Andrea Sorrentino, another one I'll be talking about. Little Monsters, another great book. So he's excellent at horror. And this is another pairing with Andrea Sorrentino, who he worked on the Gideon Falls series with. And this feels like just an evolution of that series in a lot of different ways. Take a look at that. It's about a bunch of people trapped into tenements where there's some very mysterious Stranger Things as alternate dimensions of horror going on here. And they have to join together to find out what the fuck is happening. And this has some of the best visuals in a horror comic I have ever read, including Gideon Falls. Just Sorrentino really stepped it up here. The layouts, the pages, they're all great. Take a look at this, for example. This right here is really just evocative and tone setting. Exactly what you want to be seeing here. The use of colors of reds and blacks and blank space and the layouts here, for example. And how do you even think to do that? But Bone Orchard Mythos is a shared horror universe, meaning that you can pick up any of these books. The first one's The Passageway. The second one's called 10,000 Black Feathers. And this latest one is called The Tenement. And I believe there is going to be more in this series, much more. So it's hard to judge this one even entirely alone as well. Absolutely sensational, terrifying spreads right here. We have this blank space utilized perfectly with this red skull threatening to eat someone right up. Just some great work here. And the fact that the artwork is so realistic really helps out for me. We have obviously just great use of a medium that you can do stuff in here that I don't think would really be possible to the same visual extent in other mediums. And I love it for that. Basically, this book specifically is about going through an alternate dimension of this abandoned tenement where it's all horror and terrifying mysteries, all death traps and monsters, led by this little boy that seems to have some kind of clue as to how to get through here, which should be the last person to, to experience that from. But here we are. And as I go through each layer of the tenements, it gets more and more absolutely terrifying. And yeah, there are some things that you see in here that if you've read some of the other stuff, you're like, oh, okay. Yep, this is all beginning to make sense now. Like, let me show you this. This is the third floor that they access in the book. This looks like something out of Berserk. And it's not, but like, it's kind of like the colored equivalent of some of that horror that you can find in something like Berserk, if you're a fan of that series. And you know I am. I have a number of volumes there. But absolutely just sensational layouts. I mean, I know I'm showing a lot of this book off, but there's just so many great spreads to see here. And let me see if there's anything else that I really want to show off here. You get the explanations of everything that happened in the series. And yeah, just some of this stuff is absolutely breathtaking. And I love seeing the evolution of an artist. We got some of the variant covers right here. As you can see, they're all very interestingly designed. And I love horror comics, so this is absolutely right up my alley. I urge anyone who's interested in horror or horror comics at all to give this book specifically a try. Out of all the horror stuff that Jeff Lemire has done, I think maybe this is the easiest to get into. It's the most breathtaking visually, and you can really understand the creepy side of horror, not the jump scares, although there are jump scares in here. There absolutely are. You can understand the creepy, spine-tingling element of horror and how that can be really accomplished through horror in an interesting way, because I imagine a lot of people would say, well, how do you really scare people in a comic book? You know, such a static medium. You're just turning pages, you know. You can't really get under people's skin in a great way, you'd think, because you can just see everything right there. It has to be on the page. It has to be told through art. Tenement's going to answer that question in a really interesting way. So I do hope that you'll check it out if that sounded at all interesting. Now moving on, because I talked about that book for way too long. But I do love it. I do. We have... Oh yeah. A series that I love very dearly. The latest installment in it. The Vinland Saga Deluxe Editions. Now, I've talked so much about Vinland Saga these past few months because they do keep putting these hardcover and deluxe editions out at a pretty quick rate. The same way they did for, well, I know it's a different company, but they put the Berserk deluxe editions out pretty swiftly as well. They can get these manga deluxe editions locked in pretty fast. But as far as Vinland Saga goes, I think it's one of the best stories manga and anime, those worlds have to offer. I think it's a great comic, absolutely. I think that the presentation here is great. It's always been great. You have this big, thick spine. You have the symbols at the top going all the way around the book right here. And you have this great engraved symbol here. You have the actual artwork of the book, which is just sensational. We're getting into some of my favorite content in here, which is the farmland stuff that they cover in season 2. And yeah, this stuff right here is just great to me. You have the story really showing that it's not afraid to really have a point and show you that a story about violence and war, maybe that's entertaining, but it's definitely not the answer. It aims, this series does, to present you with an answer to all of that and hopefully give you a more nuanced perspective on the way that the world is. And I loved it for that. There are scenes in these series that, yeah, they're violent. Like, take a look at this. But the main character learns how to surpass that side of himself and go forward to find something that is hinged upon peace and justice and family and all these loving virtues instead of, misery and death begetting more death and violence and everything like that. I love this story so much, and I think it's very rare that stories today have as much of a point as this one does, especially if they're a historical series. Just, set in the past. Usually that's used as an excuse for violence or for explaining one aspect about a culture. But this really transcends all of that and gives you a story about mankind and the human condition and what it takes for us to be better. And of course we have the maps at the end. I love my maps. But yes, sir. There we go. Love Vinland Saga. Can't talk enough about it. Farmland stuff is great. If you just want violence, you'll be out of there. But now, ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, we have Invincible, the library edition. I had to face around backwards. You guys couldn't see that properly. But I love Invincible. At last, I'm so glad to have the final installment of this great series in my possessions, in my grubby little paws, because Invincible is great. It is one of the superhero stories like Ultimate Spider-Man, like Daredevil, that's just incredibly consistent from beginning to end and feels unique, feels like it's trying to tell its own story rather than just being another copy of a Superman or a Batman or something like that, But Invincible is spectacular. I won't go too in-depth with actually discussing the story. I won't do a proper review, but if you know who Omni-Man is, right there, fighting for his son, with his son, rather, Mark Grayson, in a very bloody scene. Of course, we have both perspectives on this slipcase edition, because this is an absolute edition. And we have, the letters of Invincible on the back right here. Not the way I choose to display them, as you can see. Got them all right. Well, I don't have them all. I don't have them all. I'm missing number 3. They gotta put that out for me, because they don't have the full set, because this is the last book. And you have some of that great Ryan Ottley art, which is one of the reasons I love this series so much. On the back of the book, I won't explain exactly who these people are. You can kind of tell. But I won't explain that because I know that there's a lot of people who are just waiting for the series to be released as an animation so that they can consume it fully. But the artwork here is great. This is Ryan Otley at, in my opinion, the top of his game. Character work is off the charts. Invincible is just an incredibly satisfying superhero story that does pretty much everything you'd want and more with all the violence and relationship stuff it adds into it. Like right here, I won't explain exactly what's happening in the scene so it doesn't get spoiled for you guys that want to, keep in track with what's going on with this series. But some of the emotional beats towards the end with Omni-Man and his son, they really land.